Hello BookTube, and welcome to another weekly reading vlog. This week I've been working on two books. The grammar book, an ESL-EFL Teacher's Course, second edition by Marianne Celce-Murcia and Diane Larsen-Freeman. Sorry, I know it's showing up in mirror image on this video. Just bear with me, I guess. And The Moral Animal, Why We Are the Way We Are, The New Science of Evolutionary Psychology by Robert Wright. So, lots to talk about this week, with The Moral Animal in particular. So I'll start with the grammar book. I got 24 pages read of this book from pages 82 to page 106, which were chapters on phrase structure. So chapter 5, Introduction to Phrase Structure, which I was halfway through last week. You can see they've got sentence trees up here. If you're familiar with some of the other books I've been reading, like Chomsky's Universal Grammar or The Linguistic Wars, some of these sentence trees might look vaguely familiar to you. I think they come out of the Chomskyan tradition, is what I mean to say by that. Now, they do say in this book that they're using their own somewhat simplified version of this, but I think it is similar to the trees used in Chomskyan school of grammar. Again, as I mentioned in previous videos, this is my second time through this because I attempted this book last year and didn't make it through. And it's very informative. It goes into what I consider a lot of detail, more detail than ESL, EFL books usually get into. So I'm very glad I'm reading this. I feel like I'm learning a lot. What discourages me is that I read this all last year, and so much of it I feel like I'm coming at for the first time. I mean, I remember the feeling of reading these passages. I remember sitting down in the coffee shop at my school with paper and pen and doing my own sentence trees and the exercises in the back. And I definitely remember the feeling of these chapters, but so much of the detail I'd forgotten. And in a way that's part of life, but it is always discouraging when you're studying something, how it's one thing to read it, but to get it into your permanent memory is something else altogether. So I am doing the exercises. In fact, let me show you some of the exercises I've been doing here. There are exercises at the end of each chapter. So again, apologies. This phone does mirror images when it's set up like this. I'm not quite sure how to fix that. But bear with this being in reverse. Putting these sentences into the trees, and then to put, I think, what they call the output, and then mapping the subject-verb agreement onto the output. So you're doing kind of three exercises, which feels a little bit redundant, but I've got a certain personality type. I like to do all the exercises in the book. Something that I remember from the last time I attempted this book, and which I'm finding again now, is you get into a sentence tree, and then you find out that you do not have enough room on the right-hand side of your paper to fit in everything, so it gets cramped over here. And this notebook is not ideal for this. I would really be nice to have some nice white paper. When I was doing this last year at work, I would just take scrap paper from the recycling box and use the big A4. We in Vietnam over here are on lockdown for another wave of the coronavirus outbreak. So I'm stuck in my apartment doing this. So yeah, you can see sometimes it gets a little bit cramped over on this side. This takes up some time. It's kind of interesting to a degree. When I was reading The Linguistic Wars, remember a comment Chomsky made about why he liked to do linguistics. He said it's kind of like a crossword puzzle. And there's a certain element of this where you've got a sentence, it's kind of like a crossword puzzle, getting all the different components into the right place. It also, depending on what your mood is, can be a little bit of a pain in the neck. Reminds me of diagramming sentences from junior high school, which, by the way, I've learned actually since I've gone out and lived abroad, this is a distinctly American thing, I believe. And even then, it seems to depend from school to school. I've known other Americans who haven't done it. But anyone else out there ever diagram sentences in junior high school? I think it's only Americans that do it. And then even then, it seems to vary from American to American. So point being, it's kind of satisfying working out the crossword puzzle. It also, when there's like 10 of them in a row in the book, it gets a little bit tiring. And the stuff here where you've got to map the output and then map on the number and the singular and plural and then the number of the verb feels a little bit repetitive, but I've got a certain personality. I like to just do all the exercises thoroughly. Actually, with one exception, stuff in here with open-ended questions I don't actually do. And there's always open-ended questions at the very beginning of the end of each chapter. So, for example, the end of chapter 6, exercise 1, it says, provide an original example sentence illustrating each of the following terms. Underline the pertinent words in your example. A, imperative. So you have to make a sentence using an imperative. And that's, they do actually, I think, at the end of chapter 5, justify this, saying when you're in the classroom, you've got to think of examples up on the spot of different linguistic phenomena. So it's, where do they say? Yeah, here, exercise 5, chapter 5, end of chapter 5, the exercise, it says, note, since we feel it is often more important for you to provide your students with good examples than with verbal definitions, we ask you to do exercises like the first one below throughout the text. And then, yes, provide an original example sentence illustrating each of the following concepts. But I feel like, even though these are relatively simple, like noun phrase, adverbial of reason, like I could totally do that, but I don't see the point. I mean, for one, it's kind of too easy, and for another thing, there's no way to check your answer. But stuff where there is a definite answer, like diagramming your sentences. Sorry, it's not diagramming, is it? It's sentence trees. Diagramming is something else. And then, yeah, you can totally check these in the back and see if you got the right sentence tree. And these I do. It's also time consuming. I was working on this for maybe like an hour this afternoon, where I was stuck on page 107 just working through the exercises. And that's, the reason number 356 why weekly page counts are kind of meaningless, why it's stupid to compare how many pages you read from week to week, because a page can mean wildly different things from one book to another. And for a book like this, where you get stuck working through the exercises at the end of each chapter, what do the page counts at the end of the week even mean? So yeah, I've been doing this. I want to circle back to something I just said earlier. The frustration I feel with reading a lot of these grammar books, but not having it stick in long-term memory. Because of that, because of a few other reasons, and something I've been kicking around in my head, I've decided to try an experiment with making grammar explanation videos as a way to try to consolidate my grammar knowledge. Because I feel like reading it is one thing, but kind of working with it or explaining it or making a video about it is another thing. So starting this past week, whenever I was teaching a grammar point in my class, and even though we're on COVID lockdown now, we're still teaching online. Whenever I'm teaching a grammar point in my class, I make a video the night before, and I've been putting up on YouTube. The sound quality is not good. Apologies for that. I'm working just with a laptop and just a headset like this, and plus I don't know what I'm doing because I just learning how to do screencast videos. If anyone has any tips on how to improve the sound quality without buying new equipment, let me know. But that's a way where I can try and thoroughly research a grammar point, then put it into a video, then explain it, and I think that does help it stick in my mind more, and would possibly be useful for any ESL students out there, or any other ESL teachers who want to beef up on their grammar. I don't know. I guess it's not for me to judge whether it's useful, but that's my aspiration. The grammar points I've been doing this past week were gerunds and comparative and superlative adverbs. And actually, it turned out for both of those points, this particular book was not all that useful. But Practical English Usage, which is a book I have not in front of me here, but lying around the apartment somewhere, and English Grammar and Use, I found very useful for both of those points, and in addition to just searching the internet and supplementing that stuff with stuff I found on the internet. So yeah, we'll see how long that experiment goes, but that's going to be my way to attempt to try and get this grammar into my permanent memory by actually working with it more and making those videos. Okay, moving on next to the moral animal. So I talked about this last week, but it's talking about evolutionary psychology. So why we do all the crazy things we do, viewed through an evolutionary lens. And as I mentioned last week, there is just so much stuff in here that I can't possibly talk about it all. I mean, it's one of those books where every page you read, you're like, oh, really? Oh, is that true? What does that mean? Every page has got something to react against. Yeah, so where to even begin with this? Well, let me start off by saying that a lot of this was not completely new. This book was published in 1995 originally, before the internet, but a lot of the content in this book has been on YouTube by various internet celebrities. And I'm thinking of Steven Pinker, Richard Dawkins, Jordan Peterson, and Sam Harris, who all four of which I've spent a large amount of time over the past few years listening to on YouTube. Maybe more time than I should have. I probably spend way more time on YouTube than is healthy for me. But I've acquired a familiarity with their philosophies through YouTube, and a lot of that is reflecting the content of this book. Now, I'm not sure. I mean, this book was published in 1995, so possibly they could have read it. Actually, Steven Pinker definitely read it because he's quoted here in the blurb on the front cover. But Robert Wright is not an original researcher. He's somebody who's writing a popular science book reporting what other scientists have said. So possibly they got it from other sources. I'm not sure how influential this book in particular has been. But for example, there was a chapter on social relations, and it was talking about how males organize themselves into hierarchies and how these hierarchies are, among other things, useful in Darwinian terms because the higher up you are in the hierarchy, the more selective you can be about your mates, or the more either the more mates you have, or the more selective you can be, the quality of your mates would go up in crude Darwinian terms based on where you are in the hierarchy. I thought, boy, that sounds like some Jordan Peterson videos I've listened to. And then this past week, I listened to some more Jordan Peterson videos. I forget why. Maybe it just showed up on the algorithm. YouTube, actually. YouTube has seemed to figure out what I'm doing on other windows. So like if I Google search something on Google, it will show up in my YouTube algorithm, which I guess shouldn't surprise me. That's how these cookies work and everything, right? But yeah, I was re-listening to those YouTube videos by Jordan Peterson, and yeah, exactly. It's struck me that the similarity between what was in here and what he was saying was really striking. The hierarchy, the dominance, the status, the way men are more driven than women to work themselves up the hierarchy for evolutionary reasons. The serotonin that gets released as your status increases. And the serotonin kind of makes, among other things, it makes you feel good. They compared it in this book to a glass of wine. So the idea that you are physiologically addicted to positive peer feedback because of the good chemicals it releases in your brain, which is why I'm extrapolating here, because this isn't in the book. This book was in 1995, before Facebook. But it's easy to extrapolate to that's why so many of us are addicted to social media. How many likes did I get? What messages did I get? How many positive comments did I get? Because of stuff that's in this book about how addicted we are for presumably Darwinian reasons to positive social feedback that's reinforcing our sense of status or how we are valued in our group. Although I was reminds me of another thing I was reading, something Freddie DeBoer wrote. He said, we're not designed to operate in internet communities. People are not designed to seek large followings on YouTube or something like that. We're designed to operate in a very kind of small hunter-gatherer society. And so that's maybe one way where our evolutionary wiring is going a little bit fritzy when it gets onto something like YouTube or Facebook or something like that. But yeah, you know, going through this book, there's so many aspects of human behavior where you're like, oh yeah, I do that all the time. This is exactly me. I mean, I hate to admit this for obvious reasons, but their description of the behavior of a low-status male is exactly my behavior. It's. I mean, I suppose I'm not giving away anything because I've never made a secret, never been able to make a secret about the fact that I'm extremely socially awkward. So that's obviously where I am on the hierarchy, very low down on it. And it describes the way that these people would typically act in this hierarchy. And I thought, yeah, that's it. That's exactly how I act. And then it had the Darwinian reasons for it, is because, you know, males low on the hierarchy, these behaviors are beneficial for ingratiating themselves into the group and kind of, showing the alpha males that they are no challenge and, you know, trying to get what food and resources they can from their place in the hierarchy. Yeah, so you read this and you constantly think, oh boy, that describes exactly who I am or what I do. And it's all through that, not just for the stuff on the hierarchy, but, you know, stuff about gossip. It says, human beings love gossip because this is a sort of information exchange where we are proving our value to other people in the group, and then hoping to get something something reciprocated, something in exchange. Talks about reciprocal altruism, where the reason we are nice to people is because we want something back. But if people are not nice to us back, then we cut that off. The moral here is quite often used ironically or sarcastically. We are not moral purely for the sense of being moral. We are moral because we want something back from people. And on the one hand, that was a bit of a tough pill to swallow because I, to a certain extent, am an idealist. I want to believe in the goodness of the human spirit. But in another sense, it's like, yeah, that's exactly how I act. I mean, I like to have this idea of myself as being a good person who forgives and turns the other cheek. And, I'm just a generally nice guy is the self-image I want to have. But, if somebody is not nice to me back, even in very little ways, especially if they're a stranger, like somebody cuts me off on the highway or something like that, somebody I don't know at all, then, immediately they're like, okay, they're not part of my in-group. People who I don't perceive as being friendly to me back, I develop hostile attitudes towards very quickly. Sorry, I'm rambling all over the place. I was talking about gossip. It says gossip is one of the things. It says trading gossip is one of the main things friends do, and it may be one of the main reasons that friendships exist. Actually, jumping back in that paragraph, and it says, indeed, the sort of gossip that people in all cultures have an apparently inherent thirst for, tales of triumph, tragedy, bonanza, misfortune, extraordinary fidelity, wretched betrayal, and so on, match up well with the sorts of information conducive to fitness. And again, this is in our ancestral environment when we're with a small group. And we want to figure out what's going on in our groups so that we know how to manipulate that information and use it for finding mates or increasing our status or something like that. Again, when you're on YouTube, which our brains were not designed for, it all goes a little bit haywire. But, that's why those drama videos are so popular on YouTube. And I hate to admit this, I can go down rabbit holes where I watch tons of drama videos, and it's not something I'm proud of, and it's not something I set out to do. Like, I open up the computer, I go onto YouTube, I think, okay, I'm going to watch a history video, I'm going to watch a booktube video or something to improve my mind, and then I see a drama video pop up because the algorithm suggested it, and it's got some sort of clickbaity title, and I just can't resist. And then I click on it, and it's somebody spilling the tea, as the expression goes. And I just get hooked into it. And I watch the full 40 minutes of it. And it's got nothing to do with me, no relevance for my life, does not improve my mind at all, but I am just addicted to it. And it's these kind of irrational behaviors that if they don't come from some sort of, they've got it doesn't have any utilitarian purpose, my watching those drama videos. So where does that come from? I mean, I was raised in a religious environment, so I guess religious answer would be Satan is tempting me to watch drama videos instead of watching a history video. But, that all seems a little bit silly. But speaking of which, I guess another thing that occurs to me here is this book feels like it's making a lot of sense to me because it's pinpointing a lot of very strange human behaviors that I do and maybe a lot of us do. And I'm like, geez, yeah, I totally do that. And then it's giving an explanation for it. So once it's very easy to grab hold of the explanation because it's the only explanation being offered within the confines of this book. So it says, okay, here is a strange, irrational human activity. And you're like, well, geez, I didn't really think about it before, but now that you mention it, I totally do that strange, irrational activity all the time. Why? And then it says, okay, and here's the Darwinian explanation. And you're like, of course, that makes perfect sense. But I guess to the extent maybe I'm skeptical of this book, or the extent I'm trying to be skeptical, but it's really hard because the book is winning me over. But to the extent I'm trying to be skeptical, it's the idea that, okay, once you've posed that mystery about this strange, irrational human behavior, once you've posed this mystery about psychology, then you don't necessarily have to grab the first explanation that's on hand. Freud would have given another explanation. Now, Freud is largely discredited these days, is my understanding. I'm not an expert in psychology. But, who knows? Maybe in 100 years, half of this stuff will be discredited. I don't think evolution itself would be discredited in 100 years. I'm not like a crazy creationist or anything like that. But perhaps a lot of this extrapolating from evolutionary causes to the intricacies of the human mind might be discredited or more refined. The other thing that strikes me the more I think about this, like I said before, it's a very dim view of human nature. The idea that we're not moral per se, but our genes are prompting us to be nice to other people, or more importantly, to look like we're being nice to other people. Because it says our morals drastically change when we're being observed and when we're not being observed. And I thought, yeah, guilty. That's totally me. I am so nice to other people when I'm being observed, and a completely different person when I'm not being observed, if I'm making confessions here. But yeah, so it's a very dim view of human nature that's somewhat depressing. But when I thought about it, I thought, actually, this is not completely alien to my background. I grew up in a Calvinist background, and the Calvinists had this idea of total depravity. You are complete scum. You are so selfish. You will do any selfish thing you could, and you think that you're nice, but you're not really nice. You're just tricking yourself into thinking you're nice for your own selfish reasons. And the only way you could possibly do anything moral or anything good is by the grace of God. Otherwise, left without that grace of God, you are just a complete, total, depraved human being. And I thought, actually, when you think about it, maybe the Christian theology is not really so much at odds with what's in this book. Maybe what's really under fire is the idealistic liberalism of the 19th century. Bakunin or Marx or Jefferson, maybe. I don't know, the idea that we human beings are, if you got rid of the church, and if you got rid of government, and if you got rid of capitalism, we human beings are just completely nice, and we would create our own utopia. Or that's an extreme version of it, but to varying degrees in liberalism. So maybe actually it's not Christianity so much that has maybe it's a real threat to liberalism, and perhaps it would be a strange ally with Christianity, would it not, for the fact that their metaphysics are so completely different. So yeah, that would be the problem reconciling this with Christianity. Yeah, what else was I going to say? Christianity. Oh, right. Okay. So, sorry. I was going somewhere with that. Completely lost my train of thought. I got distracted because a message just... okay. Maybe I should just end the video here.